Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. First weekend of the NHL season is done. It was a little weird yesterday. There was only one game. I think it was Dallas, Ottawa. It's like, are they scheduling with the mind of don't go up against the NFL because we know we'll lose? Yeah. There are a few games tonight, and most notably Rangers and Toronto. We'll talk about a little bit about that later on, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So when we all grew up learning how to play baseball, and a lot of us did, you were always told, and I was always an infielder. I played outfield a little bit, but mostly an infielder. You were always told, even if you can't field the ball cleanly, knock it down and keep it in the infield. Well, last night was an example of that desperately needed to happen for the Dodgers because, the Braves have, become a hot team now. Max Fried, one of the best pitchers in baseball right now. And the Dodgers desperately needed that win. They didn't want to go down 2-0. Right. So it's a 2-2 game, ninth inning, 2 out, tie game. Balls hit up the middle, but Seager's played right up the middle. It's literally hit 6 inches to his right, and for some reason he tries to backhand it. And the backhand is such a low percentage play, no matter how good you are. And so I put it online. He needed to either field that or knock it down. And AJ Perez, who I know is a Dodger fan, he's like, what, with 100-mile-an-hour ball getting hit? I'm like, yeah. 100, 105, 110. Your job is to knock it down, even if you can't field it cleanly. If he knocks it down, the run doesn't score.
The problem is Seager, and I know this because I'm in a baseball league and I have Seager. Seager has never been known as a high-end defensive shortstop.
But you know what's interesting? Even on the broadcast, even on ESPN, they're all just like, "Oh, he couldn't make the play."
Right, because there are players in positions in baseball now where if they're just acceptable defensively, that's good enough. I mean, I know that because of the Yankees. A guy like Gleyber Torres, they moved to shortstop, and he was a below average, a below average defensive shortstop.
But he's still an infielder, right?
Yeah, but
I'm not asking him to field it cleanly, Mike. I'm saying put your body in front of the ball.
Get in front of it. Yeah, I mean, at least you limit it to if you can't get it, you knock it down. You limit it to a single.
Right.
But Seager, I mean, this is the reason. One of the reasons Seager might not be back with the Dodgers is because defense, because he's going to want $30-35 million, and defensively he's at best average. So
no, that's fair.
They're in a hole. They're in a hole down 2-0. I just have to say, watching the NFL yesterday, watching a few games, the New England Dallas game was bizarre in the sense that, I mean, bad decision making, bad calls. A team basically just has to get a first down to run out the time, and Mac Jones, a rookie quarterback, throws a pick six to Diggs, who right now I think he has like 7 or 8 interceptions in 5 games. Or 5 or 6.
If you're good at your job, you could have a lot of interceptions in this league because you're throwing the ball so much. If you're able to read it, I'm surprised there's not more guys jumping plays. But the problem is guys are more interested in after the catch trying to knock it out of somebody's hand. They're more interested in the fumble than they are in the interception, and that definitely comes into play with quarterbacks too.
And I have to say, I don't know your feeling on this. I have to say, could they maybe outlaw the punch, meaning the punching out?
I would.
I mean, because
it's not a play.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, you're like yesterday in the Seattle-Pittsburgh game, the defensive back punched the ball out of DK Metcalf's hand. It caused a fumble that almost allowed them to run timeout. And then in the overtime, TJ Watt, was behind the play. Geno Smith was running past him, and he couldn't tackle him, so he punched the ball out as he's grabbing him, and that caused. I get it. I'm sure I'm I'm sure NFL coaches don't want that because that's the way turnovers occur. But honestly, you're right. It's not a play. It's not a tackle. It's not a sack. You're just punching the ball. These guys where are they going to Tyson Fury or to learn how to knock the ball out of somebody's hands?
I'll tell you the other bad point. And Funky, see, that's why I had said Sider is a real color candidate based on what Funky just posted. Anyhow, getting back to it, the play with Prescott trying to, get on top and just have the ball break the plane. I haven't seen that many fumbles with that play, but to be honest, I'm surprised there's not more because, again, it's not really a play because you're not really getting the ball over the line anymore. And I'm surprised it doesn't hit more helmets. I'm surprised it doesn't happen. That's why I hate that play, by the way.
Well, I've seen Josh Allen do that a couple times where, the intent hit there is to just break the plane with control. The problem is that, again, Dak Prescott's and New England's defense knew this. Dak Prescott reaches the ball out, and as he's reaching it out, the guy punches it out of his hand or knocks it out of his hand. So, yeah, you might be micromanaging things a bunch if you do that, but I just think it's so pervasive now that it's distracting more than anything. It's like, a guy can't tackle somebody, so he's gonna throw like a Superman punch, and knock the ball.
They're teaching it like they're like, hey, might as well try.
All right, let's get the show started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, October 18th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, we had an interesting weekend. We'll touch on a few things related to the schedule, but there's some news today that we'll start off with. First one, Russ, you reported something over the weekend regarding the Rangers' Russian player Vitaly Kratzoff. Fill us in.
Yeah, so basically, he is in Russia. He was at a game, and I was told that there's around 5 teams interested in him. And then it sort of snowballed, right? Because it's like, well, it's his fault. Well, it's the Rangers' fault. Well, his value's down. Well, and it's like, it's not as clean a situation as you think it is, and it's not as bad a situation as you think it is. But it was funny because when I wrote that the Rangers are in the driver's seat, they are, because no matter what happens, they will be the ones that decide what happens. So whether they trade him tomorrow, whether they trade him a year from now, whether he doesn't play in hockey at all this year, that'll all be up to them at this point, because he could come back and say, I want to play, and they'd be like, we may not want you to play. Right. That could happen. He also could play in the Olympics if he were chosen. He's probably not going to be chosen, but just the idea is if he were chosen for that team, he could go play in the Olympics. The Rangers wouldn't stop that because it would help the trade value. But the point is, there is a reason teams are interested, and that's because, and it's not because what he has or hasn't done at the NHL level. It's because he's still the same player everybody scouted in the draft, scouted favorably, and said, hey, this guy could really be a talent in the NHL if he's only 21. We're not talking about this guy being 25 years old. So is he immature? Yeah, absolutely. Did he make mistakes? Absolutely. Did the Rangers make mistakes? Absolutely. The Rangers could have just said, hey, he stepped away from the team right now for personal reasons, and it would have blown over in a day or so. And then they could have been working on these trades. But that didn't happen. It didn't work out that way. So now you have this situation, and honestly, I think it's going to hold off for a while for a trade. I think, they're talking, obviously, because they asked the agent to go set up trades, and the agent has done just that. And for people thinking he's going to go for like a third or a fifth, and that's it, this isn't the NFL.
No,
that's not going to happen. That's ridiculous.
But the reason, and I mentioned this to you yesterday, and we know that it's a new administration with the Rangers after Gordon and Davidson were fired. But you have to consider that if you just look at the track record of the Rangers over the last few years, where they draft Elias Anderson 7th overall, I don't think they did a particularly good job at developing him, yo-yoing him back between the Rangers and Hartford, not playing him on the 4th line.
He never even settled in living in North America.
Right. And then basically he decided, I'm going to go back to Sweden, and they ended up trading him to LA for a 2nd-round pick. And that development, could adversely affect the lack of development could adversely affect the rest of his career. Capo Caco has not been as much of an impact player as people expected him to be after being selected 2nd overall. He's still young. He still has an opportunity, but right now you see Anderson, you see Kratzoff, and you say, okay. And on the flip side of it, the guy, they get Adam Fox for a 3rd-round pick, and he turns out to be a Norris Trophy winner. They draft Keandre Miller. Was it 3rd round, 2nd round?
No, he was a 1st-rounder.
Oh, okay, late 1st round.
He's like 21.
Yeah, late 1st round. So was Niels Lundqvist. So
yeah, he was like 25.
Yeah, so late 1st round picks where I think they took a little bit of time to let them develop. Those turned out better, but the guys who they've sort of, forced quickly is the right terminology, but they haven't done a great job.
No, I mean, they haven't done a great job. And it's more than just, okay, the guy should just take the assignment and go. That's fine, but you should know who you're dealing with. Based on what happened the last time, why did you think it was going to go smoothly this time? Now, this time he didn't have an out where he could actually go play in the KHL because he can't go play there. But who didn't think he wasn't going to go back to Russia? Now, he did say through his agent, right, that we read, about a week ago, that, hey, he'd play for another team in the AHL. So then you knew, okay, this is really problematic. And then you knew when Kakko went out and Morgan Barron came right up, it's not like they're calling him or he's saying, all right, I'll come back because I could play now. That all seems to be closed as a channel. And so we're in this holding pattern right now. It's not like it's the first time it's ever happened, but it's happened to them more than you would like to see. And I don't think it's just because they drafted a Russian player, because that's not fair to all Russian players. There's these rumors that, hey, he was promised this or promised that. Well, if he was, and that guy that promised him is no longer there, then yeah, that's a mistake. But again, the guy in charge has to sort of be the guy keeping an eye on that. That's why it's a hard job. It's not ever a clean thing when you draft a guy. You draft a guy, then it's like it's up to him and it's up to the team for the development, the combination.
Now, what do you think for Timothy's question here? What do you think they want in return for him?
I think they would want a pick and a soon-to-be roster player or a roster player. And it doesn't mean a first line or anything like that. But I think something like that. And I think if they got that, that would be palatable. I don't think you could expect, a top 6 guy who's already a top 6 guy. They may get somebody who could be a top 6 guy, or they may go 1-for-1. Like if you were able to trade him for Rasmus Kupari as an example to the Kings, right, who's a center and they're short on centers. The Kings have a load of centers. They might be willing to do that. That's something where you could look for something like that.
Yeah, two change of scenery type guys.
Maybe. He's a way better player than Elias Anderson in the sense that knowing what he could turn into. So it's not going to be the same return as Elias Anderson. And everybody always thinks they're going to get the worst return. And he could trade him today if he's looking for the worst return, but he's not. That's not happening. So yeah. They're looking to recoup something. We don't know exactly what, but the idea is he's not on the team. Hockey teams are very good at when players aren't there, just sort of carrying on, right? And that's fine. The problem is with Kakko out, with Strome out now, with COVID suspicion, whatever. All of a sudden, their lineup is a bunch of muckers and the top 2 lines, and so it's not nearly as good as it could have been, or should have been, or you wanted it to be. Yeah, like Randy. They are never going to be able to be offered Kanazeri in a swap. The Flames believe he's their best prospect in their organization, and they believe he's a center. So that'll never happen.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Want to add one other thing about Kratzoff. The only reason I said on this show I wouldn't have drafted him because I thought he was a home run swing. I thought he was a home run swing that he would become like an all-star. And so I was looking for something more concrete. Usually when you have a couple of high picks in the first round, you're looking for, something more concrete for one of them. And so I wasn't a huge fan of him, but did he look great in international play against, his peers? Yeah, he did. And so end of the day, Kev, I'm just saying, I had gotten information yesterday, tweeted it out about Kratzoff, and, there's apparently close to 5 teams interested in him. And of course, fans all think, well, they're just going to get like a 5th round pick and that's it, because everybody knows the Rangers have to trade him, except he's really young and teams do know about his talent and teams do have the same scouting that the Rangers had on him, where he could be a very high talent in the league if things break right. So it's not a guaranteed death sentence of a bad trade or bad value here.
Yeah, no, and I think they'll get more than a 5th round pick.
Of course.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I know there's teams out there that like him and are willing to give him an opportunity to see what he can do. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks it's a slam dunk that he's going to be a top player, but I think everybody thinks he can play. So we'll see.
I mean,
for teams that are deep, it'll be worth the risk, I think. That's what I think they're going to look at it as.
Well, I mean, it could be a situation, and I'm just using Buffalo as an example, Russ, but okay. Buffalo has got a number of positions on their roster where they have basically hole pluggers. Would they rather have a young player with upside potential? Sure. Now, they could trade a 2nd round pick and one of those hole pluggers who could play in the bottom 6 for the Rangers, and that might be a return that would be good enough for the Rangers and would be beneficial to a team like the Sabres who needs more talent. So it may not be the Sabres, it could be Arizona, it could be Detroit. But
the problem with that is I just had this conversation about that very subject, about because I thought the Coyotes would be a perfect fit, and then another GM pointed out they're trying to gather draft picks, not trade them away. Like, that's not the same. And he said the same will be true. Like all the bottom teams that you think are not going to want to give up the draft pick that the Rangers are going to, want to take. So
that's a fair point. But there are teams out there with multiple picks and multiple rounds.
Right. And he said he felt like it's more likely to go to a contender actually that, knows it's not going to get an early pick in the draft. And
that's fair too. I probably do see that more. That's why I was thinking a team there are teams that are deep with prospects that are good, decent teams that also have some picks.
And Arizona has 5 2nd round picks.
Yeah, but again, like Kevin said,
I get what Kevin said is right, but I'm saying they have 5 2nd round picks, plus they have so many unrestricted free agents that they're going to add more picks over the next year. So if there's an opportunity there to get a young, I mean, they have Soderstrom, they have Dylan Guenther, they have Clay, they have young players who are developing that are feeding through their system. Who is the third overall pick that they have buried in the minors right now? Hayton.
Yeah, Barrett Hayton.
What somebody like?
Are you gonna make it though, Russ? I mean, Hayton, the boy. They originally thought that he was going to be a stud. And
I don't know if he's going to make it, Kev, because they rushed him. There was no question they rushed him. When they brought him up the way they brought him up, there was no way he was going to be a scorer of any type in the NHL. So they were hoping that maybe he would do all the other things and maybe the scoring would come. But the problem is you're better off letting that guy keep scoring and get better at the other things. And when he's ready, bring him up. And they did the opposite.
Well, yeah. And to be honest, like I'm not to me, the draft is not the panacea that everyone seems to think it is. Like, it's hard to build through a draft and you need luck. I mean, we've seen
the Oilers couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. They've had a lot of early picks, and it still took them forever. Really, and if it wasn't for Connor McDavid, they'd probably still be limping along.
Right.
So you need a combination. But I'd rather have we've seen Kravtsov, so we know more about him than we know
about a pre-draft guy.
Yeah, exactly. So I would make that pick if it were me. But that's just what the GM said. He didn't think they would want to give up the draft pick.
No, and you know what? And the GM's probably right. But at some point, there's going to be a team that looks over the scouting on him again and says, we've got some things here that I think can make this deal. And this works out, this could be a home run for us. And that's the way I have to look at it.
Some fairly significant news regarding Tampa Bay Lightning forward Nikita Kucherov coming out from Eric Erlinson. He said that there's Kucherov was injured over the weekend. The first indications is that the prognosis is not positive and that surgery could be involved. Now, Kev, when we talked about Tampa Bay, I said, they lost that entire third line. They lost Tyler Johnson. For them to repeat or for them to have success during the regular season, they were probably, unlike the last few years where Stamkos missed a significant portion of time or Kucherov sat out the entire regular season, they would need these guys to be healthy for them to probably finish, first or second in the Atlantic. Not that that means a great deal, but now Kucherov's hurt. We're assuming it's going to be something long-term, and this is not good news for them.
No, not at all, because their depth has been eroded. And, you still got to play well enough in the regular season. Like even if you're going to be in the 2-3 series, you want home ice advantage. So I think this is bad news. And, terrible news. And if they lose one more, then you really got trouble. And, we talk all the time, like I'm not a big believer that people are injury prone, but it does occasionally crop up. And Steven Stamkos has been injured pretty much every year.
Yes.
So, he could certainly get injured again. I don't know if it's the way he plays or just that he's got bad luck, but he sure has been injured a lot in his career. There's no doubt about it.
Nobody's going to say a word if Tampa falls off here because, they traded a ton of guys or they just couldn't retain them,
right?
Both and injuries. Like it's just, it's really hard to win 3 in a row, but it was monumental to win 2 in a row in this league. I mean, it really is. Yeah. And so they were bound to show some effects. And I get what Cooper's saying. Don't press the panic button yet. Sure, you have to say that. But I think it's fair of us to say we didn't love the way they looked before this announcement. So I don't know how they're going to look now.
Well, the other problem with it all is that as much as I don't think the draft is the panacea, you need draft picks, and they've been picking late and they've been trading picks away because they've been in contention. So
yeah, but their system is fairly well regarded. Now it's a question of
draft well,
that's a question of whether Taylor Radish and Boris Kachuk and some of these guys that they've drafted in the first or second round the last couple of years who have played very well down in Syracuse can take the step up.
But and none of them are A's.
No, none of them are A's.
None of them are A's prospects, and they're not really even like B+ prospects. They're prospects that could play. They're like B- C's, and they could play.
Right.
But when
I said this the other day. Obviously, I was exaggerating, but how long has Radish been around? It feels like we've been talking about him for 4 or 5 years. When was he drafted?
2016.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that is 4 or 5.
That is 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, come on. If he hasn't made it by now, geez.
Yeah, this is going to be the litmus test for those guys. There's no question.
I mean, but it is the situation similar to the Red Wings back in the day where, because the team up top was so good, they were a lot. They were
in the position, and it happened more than once, where they were forced to trade away a guy before they actually knew whether he could play.
Right, like Tampa Bay lost Barbelet on waivers because he was out of options. They've lost players that way, and they were forced to trade Tyler Johnson probably when they didn't want to trade Tyler Johnson because he made too much money. So, we'll find out in the next couple of days.
Well, we've had a number of big injuries. I mean, Pacioretty's injury in Vegas is
6 weeks.
He's hurt a lot too. He's another guy.
He's out 6 weeks. Mark Stone is out day to day, so it doesn't sound too serious. I know that Eck reported yesterday that from a source of his that this is making Vegas step up their approach, their pursuit of Eichel. Okay, wait a second. Eichel's not going to be playing for 4 months.
Right.
So what the hell would
Why would you do it now?
right? What would the hell would Eichel do?
Why is it 4 months? The surgery he wants is like 4 to 6 week recovery.
They're now saying it could be up to 4 months.
I haven't seen that anywhere.
Yeah, I mean the fusion surgery. The original diagnosis was the disc replacement was a 6 to 8 week recovery time. The fusion would be 3 months, which was odd because the Sabres wanted him to have the fusion, but they wanted him to have the fusion because it's the more accepted approach to his injury. Now they're saying, Eichel, even if he has the disc replacement, could be out as long as 3 and perhaps up to 4 months, which would, he's not going to be back for the Olympics. But what you want is him to be 100% when he comes back. And if you're scrambling right now because Pacioretty and Stone are hurt, trading for Eichel is not going to help you right now. In fact,
Nolan Patrick will be the answer, Mike.
Well, trading for Eichel. Well, first of all, they'd have some difficulty there with the salary cap situation because they're tight. But it's the same thing. It is interesting. But Kucherov's injury obviously will be long term, and that'll give the Lightning some cap maneuverability because they were in such a bad shape that if Bogosian would have been a short-term injury and not a long-term injury, they would have had to go with 5D.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up as well, Kev, because we've seen a couple instances this weekend of teams having to scramble because of COVID/injury. With Colorado having to go with 19 players because McKinnon was out with COVID. Plus, they had Landeskog suspended, and they had one other player injured. Toronto, Mrazek got hurt on Thursday, and Justin Hall, one of their defensemen, was sick. They weren't sure if it was COVID or just a regular illness. It turned out to be just a flu of some sort. And because they had to play their 7th defenseman, they couldn't call up Michael Hutchinson as an emergency recall, so they had to assign a University of Toronto goaltender on an amateur tryout. And I have to agree with Elliot Friedman. I was listening to him on the radio earlier this morning, and he's saying, the NHL should have a little more flexibility here. I know that they had this emergency recall set up after Calgary a few years ago had to play, I think, 16 or 17 players because of injury and cap stuff. But with COVID, you don't know if a player is going to be out maybe a couple hours before the game. Last year they had the taxi squads. There has to be a little more flexibility to prevent these teams from having to play with one player less or a player that's not even an NHL player.
I'm a little sympathetic to the COVID situation. I think that those guys really shouldn't count for you when they go out because this is a pandemic and we're dealing with it. But I don't have much sympathy for the other teams that are struggling.
I don't either. They got themselves in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would have no problem if they wanted to change the rules that say if it's COVID related, it doesn't count. But all the rest of these people, sorry, Charlie, you should have done a better job of managing your cap. I mean,
but it is also, it's not easy to manage COVID. But based on what happened last year, GMs in the offseason should have looked at their minor league system and said, how many guys could actually come up and play for us? How many, like Chuck Fletcher got a lot of extra guys. Well, he may have to use a lot of those extra guys if there's a COVID situation with the Flyers down the road. Other GMs could have done the same thing, Kevin, looked at it and said,
adding players to your minor league roster doesn't help you because, you're still going to have to call them up and, they're going to take up space. And then the problem is you're paying the guy who's gotten injured and then you're paying a guy who gets called up.
I know, but you still have to have the space too. That's the second part of the equation. You should never spend to the cap if you're worried about that happening. And there's teams in the league that spend to the cap. A lot of them actually more than just a couple.
No, I mean, that is the problem, but it really doesn't have anything to do with how many people you got in the minors.
Well, but sometimes it has to do with who's actually ready. Like the Leafs didn't have anybody. They had to get a guy from Canadian University. Now, I'm not going to rip on him like some people were because, hey, you know what? He probably could stop some pucks in the NHL. But at the end of the day, is that the best way to go?
No, and again, the reason why they had to sign Alex Bishop was because the only way that they would have been able to fit Michael Hutchinson on an emergency recall, because his contract would count against the cap,
Right.
it would have been to send Timothy Liljegren, who had waivers, back to the Marlies, but they needed Liljegren to play because Justin Hall was sick. So it's okay. You either have a backup goaltender who's an NHL backup, or you're playing with 5 defensemen. Choose, Kyle Dubas.
Well, I mean, that is the choice, and so he made the choice.
Yeah. Well, and it really does matter. Sometimes you have these guys in the minors. I mean, this is where when you're at the end and you're an agent, and the agent says, well, make it 1.1 million instead of 1.
Correct.
Well, it does matter, because the guy who's down in the minors who gets called up, but his salary is $1 million as opposed to $750. That's $250,000 in the pro. You may need that money down the stretch. You're so tight to the cap. So.
We mentioned this story, I think it was over a month ago, when former NHLer Jimmy Hayes passed away. I think he was 31 years old, and obviously they were going to do toxicology because it was a sudden death, not expected. And Dan Shaughnessy of the Boston Globe reported yesterday that Jimmy Hayes died with fentanyl and cocaine in his system, and also reported that he was addicted to pain pills. We hoped that it wasn't this, because we heard, his child had his second birthday, and it seemed like, there was no, at least from the initial indications, there was nothing suspicious. But this is a scourge right now. Fentanyl is, every time you hear a death, the first thing you're thinking of is fentanyl.
Yeah,
it's really sad.
Yeah, it's an epidemic, and I know, at least there's been so much publicity about it. I know, that when you're a non-athlete and you're going to your dentist and doctor now, I've had friends who've said, they've said no painkillers, because they've heard stories about, normal people. So, these are, I know there's a movie out right now where they're,
Dope Sick. It's on I think Hulu with Michael Keaton. Yeah.
And I think these things are, when they first came out, they were considered such a wonder drug because of the relief that they can provide for people. But the problem with the side effect is they're terribly addictive, and it's a sad thing. And if you just look at the number of athletes that have become addicted to these, you realize that it's a major problem, and they're always dealing with aches and pains. So it's not, when something can provide such relief, you're going to want to take it, because they're always pain. It's constant pain, and then it becomes too much, and then they have to have it, and we see what happens.
Yeah, it's a shame. We all had this in the back of our head that this could be a reason, and you're just hoping it wasn't.
Right.
You never know what that person's thinking, just because it's, your child's birthday party, and they may seem happy on the surface that moment. You don't know 2 hours from then how that person's feeling, what they're thinking. So again, and that's where, even family members can be powerless and helpless to help them. Like, I get it. It's a bad situation, and I just wish the best for the family. It's a shame, and it's a shame, for the child. Honestly, it's horrible.
Yeah, it is. Just to lighten up things a bit, Russ, we always look to Russia to lighten up things. And we found out this morning that Ilya Kovalchuk, ex-favorite player, has been named the GM of the Russian national team for the 2022 Olympics in Beijing. Okay, start the laugh track, Russ.
Yeah, it's funny because he probably wanted to play, and they probably were like, we have a good team. Why don't you run this team for us? You could be the general manager. Even though he has no experience. He has no management experience. He's never coached. He's never done anything. But you're Ilya Kovalchuk, so we'll just have you there, and you'll be around the team, and this will be great. And, I'm sure the conversation couldn't be much more than that because it's not like he's going to really do anything.
Yeah, I wonder if the GM position is more of a ceremonial.
That's what it is. That's what I'm getting at.
No. So because I think the federation picks the team. So well, I mean, it's good. I mean, the media will be happy to have him. North American media, he speaks English. That's always a plus. And
it is a plus. I mean, Kevin gets right down to the bare bones of it. Like if I'm covering it, it's as somebody else I can interview for a story.
Absolutely. And, he's also a very good quote. So, it's all good. And, there's always so much discord with the Russian team that maybe it actually will help to have a player that everybody likes, that maybe can kind of get everybody on the same page, because that's usually an issue. Like nobody can sow the seeds of dissent more than Russian players. They just for some reason their laundry is aired publicly. So at least all the Russian journalists seem to know about it. So
that's true. They really don't get away with anything.
No. And so it's all goes on, and who's not happy with his playing time and so forth. And they always try to have a representative number of players from the KHL, and although that's not really hard because they have fewer players in the NHL than you really think they do.
Yeah, so. Just to answer Funky, why not Larionov? Because I still think he's in charge of the junior team. That's why.
No, he's got promoted to. He's the it's their B team. He's the coach of their B team now.
Oh, you mean
whatever that team's called? I think it's actually called the Olympic team. Which
okay, so he's in charge of that now. Okay.
Yeah, he's up the junior program. Okay. So he's essentially now he's a member of the national team staff. Okay. So he would probably be an assistant coach at the Olympics, I would assume.
Okay.
Okay. We're only through less than a week of the regular season. So at most 3 games. Some teams have only played 1. So you can get a little glimpse of what's going on, but you can't really draw any conclusions. But let's go down, first the negative track, meaning the teams that are 0-2 or 0-3. And a couple of them are surprising here. I'm not surprised that Montreal is 0-3 because without Carey Price, without Shea Weber, but they lost a close one to Toronto. They're not, they've given up 10 goals. They lost to Buffalo. So that's not particularly surprising. Kev, the New York Islanders are 0-2. And we said the big hurdle for this team was that I think it's 13-game road trip at the beginning of the year, and them having to be probably 500 on that after those 13 games for them to be okay. And right now their schedule, they played Carolina and they played Florida, 2 tough teams on the road, and it gets easier in the next week or so, but still 0-2 for that team is a little surprising.
It is, and I think, and I saw the NHL Network, one of the analysts there, I think it was Mike Johnson, was talking about that it's not so much that they've lost a couple of games, but it's how they've lost them.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree completely in that. This is a team that is all about its defensive system and Barry Trotz's defensive system, and they have been so incredibly sloppy to the point where I think you have to wonder whether all the changes, and there have been some significant ones, taking out, Nick Leddy out of their defense and, realigning how everybody's going to play. Like that's fairly significant. And they've added Zach Parise into the mix, and there's a lot of, different things that they've done. It's pretty clear that they haven't figured it all out yet. They haven't sorted out their defensive coverage. They haven't.
No, that's a big deal, and they don't have their number one goalie. Like people may have anointed Ilya Sorokin their number one goalie, but their number one goalie was Semyon Varlamov. And I'll be honest, Kev. They keep saying he's just going to slip into the lineup at some point. I think he's going to need a conditioning assignment. I don't know how he's going to just slip in there. He hasn't been in camp. He hasn't done anything. If they just put him in not to play Corey Schneider, that's going to save volumes, because I'm sure the plan was, well, we're going to play Sorokin like the first 3 or 4, And then maybe, we could put Varlamov in there, but like Sorokin's not doing well. So at some point you might have to play Schneider and see what you have in him.
Well, and they're really kind of being kind of mysterious about Varlamov. So,
you think?
Yeah. So, more so than usual, even for me. So yeah, we don't even know what's going on there. So yeah. And Sorokin, I agree with you. Sorokin hasn't been the player that we thought he was going to be. Simple as that.
Yeah. Now in the Central, you've got 3 teams who are 0-2 or 0-2-1. The one that's glaring is the Chicago Blackhawks. Kev, I knew, Russ called it when we talked about the Blackhawks, when we did the Central preview, that we were skeptical about their defense. I think that was, right to be skeptical. And in 3 games, they've given up 13 goals against. Marc-Andre Fleury and Kevin Lankinen are probably going to sue for non-support next week, the way things are going. So, I mean, that is a concern. And, they're even saying right now that Stan Bowman might be scouring out there looking for a veteran defenseman to add to their blue line because they're just not deep enough.
Well, Stan Bowman was looking coming into the season. Like, he's really been looking for a month. Like, he knew what was going to happen. And to be honest with you, I thought they'd be able to overcome it in a short, time frame. Over the course of the season, it wasn't going to be good enough. And I really felt he was going to make a move pretty quickly because I had heard that he had been calling everybody about a defenseman. But those are hard to get.
Sure.
Because guys – want to hang on to them because they have their own problems. Like, it's amazing what stability can do in Detroit. And again, it's only 2 games, but they've looked much better than they have in the past because, they've added a Nick Leddy to the lineup. And that, suddenly he comes in and plays in your top pairing, and that moves Roenick down, moves everybody down. Mark Stahl's playing on the 3rd pairing, and he was probably one of their more consistent players last year.
Right.
And to the point where, the fans really loved him just on the basis of how hard he competes. Mark Stahl, like, he just looks like on every play.
He's all hard. He always has been.
It's really unbelievable. He looks sort of like he's leading the charge in the movie Braveheart. He would have been one of the great Ranger defensemen if he didn't have the eye injury. Like, that's really because he had an offensive game that never really had a chance to develop, and yet he still was a very solid defenseman for them, and a big reason why they were perennial playoff team for a lot of those years, because he was a rock solid defender. But again, over time, it catches up with you a little bit. He was from that 2005 draft. He's not a spring chicken, but he is loaded with heart. I have all the respect for him. Yeah. No, he's played well.
The other 2.
The one thing about Chicago, Mike, one other thing, we should bring up the fact that, look, we all like Seth Jones, but he was never a rock solid defender. We were never going to say he was one of the top 5 defenders in the league.
No, but
he was okay. It was
okay, but I think it's without the right partners, you could see he hasn't looked great, and he's getting bashed all over the place.
Yeah, the problem is, Russ, is that they're playing him 27 minutes a night.
28 minutes that first game.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's like, okay, he's your best defenseman. You're paying him $9.5 million. I get it, but Stan Bowman, you can't have. You're signing Eric Gustafson at the 11th hour because 3 years ago he scored 60 points, but he's a pylon. He's a defensive
2 years in a row, and Eric Gustafson signing doesn't look good.
No, but at least the Flyers signed him on the 1st or 2nd day of free agency, not 2 days before the beginning of the regular season.
Although they're getting the same result.
Right, exactly. The 2 other teams in the Central that are winless, one is expected, the Nashville Predators. The other one is unexpected, and that, at least to me, was the Winnipeg Jets. They lost to Anaheim. I know. You brought. I was gonna give you kudos that you picked that they were gonna finish in, I think, 5th. I still think they're a good team, but you start out losing to Anaheim, and Anaheim is not a good team right now. That's not a good first step for you.
Yeah, but I think that first loss was all John Gibson.
That's fair. He played an amazing game. You're right.
Yeah, he did. And so that one I'm just chalk up to the goaltending. But I mean, we'll see. It's so hard to get a read on it, and when it's the first week of the season, what's going to happen. Saying all that, I'm probably going to write today, my observations after the first week,
right?
Because it's just fun to speculate, but they're the Jets are not a perfect team, but in that division, like, I like their goaltending. You start ranking goaltenders, and Hellebuck's right up there. I thought they did a really good job in the offseason of improving their defense. Like, I expected Schmidt to come around. Like, he just wasn't happy in Vancouver, and it reflected in his play. He
didn't want to leave Vegas. He didn't want to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, he's never gotten over leaving Vegas, where he was an important player, and he did a good job there. So I liked what they did, and their offense. I've always liked their offense. So they've got some good players. So even without Patrick Laine, they're still.
They have good players. They don't have a lot of great players driving the offense, though, and I think that's an issue. And I think their defense is just like good enough, and that was the issue that I saw with them. Besides, I felt like last year they were starting to tune Maurice out. And I just felt like just naturally it was going to happen this year, because it's going to happen. And I think he may be there too long now.
Yeah. Well, okay. Just as meaningless as the winless teams are the undefeated teams right now. I mean, you can't draw. Like, if the Buffalo Sabres are 2-0, it's meaningless. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to rip them to shreds. But okay, they played Montreal in the second of back-to-back games with Samuel Montembeault as their goaltender, and he had trouble. He would have trouble stopping a beach ball in that game. It was 5-1 loss. And then they beat Arizona in possibly the worst game I will see all year, Russ. I mean, you've got that collection of just reprobates.
That top line is just brutal.
It's unbelievable how the NHL should be embarrassed at how bad the Arizona Coyotes are. At least the Sabres, they have they brought in some hole pluggers who are guys in their 20s who are hungry for NHL jobs, like Vinny Hinostroza or John Hayden or Ryan McGinnis. I get that they're rebuilding, but they're trying to develop their youngsters. With the exception of Soderstrom, there are no youngsters on that team. They're all 30 pluses.
Yeah, the interesting thing is everybody kept saying Bill Armstrong was killing it. Look at all these picks. Look at all these trades. He's killing it. Except it's going to take 4 or 5 years for any of that to pan out. Maybe 1 or 2 of them, get to the NHL quicker. But there's just so much lack of talent there that they're just in a canyon right now.
And Kev, I don't want to begrudge the Sabres' early success. I let the Sabre fans enjoy it because it's probably it's fleeting. But they are, they do have some good young players. Unfortunately, Middlestat got hurt in one of the first games. Yoki Haru got hurt in one of the first couple games. But, they're playing their young kids, and Dahlin looks a lot better. And a couple of the other young players like Tage Thompson, who's been given an opportunity under Don Granato, they're playing decently. So, maybe things won't be as bad as 32nd place for Buffalo, but they're going to be bad. We know they're going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing here is an indication that we were wrong. Like, this isn't going to be an epic failing season. Like, I think people thought that they may not win 10 games.
Really?
They're going to beat that. Clearly they're playing hard. Granato's a good coach. I can't say enough about him. I think he's a pro's pro, and he's getting a lot out of the younger players, which is really important. As you said, giving opportunities to some younger players who hadn't had them before. And I think a lot of these younger players feel more comfortable with him than they did, say, with Ralph Kruger.
Trust. There's a level of trust.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just agreeing with your analysis. I just don't think they're going to be as bad as some people thought they were going to be, but they're still going to be a lower rung team. It's not like they've suddenly been transformed into a team that can compete for a playoff spot. They're not experienced, and I don't believe in their goaltending whatsoever. I know it's been okay, but I just don't believe in it. So
yeah, I don't believe in it either. People wanted in the chat room wanted me to mention Tage Thompson. I don't think he's been misplayed or not played correctly. I think Don Granato just saw that like a lot of guys that are bigger.
Yeah.
He had played center before.
Right.
Why don't I try him there? Because he's got some tools, he's got some strength. Even if he were to lose some faceoffs, he could probably win them just on the battling aspect of it. And he has good hands. And sometimes these guys take time. I know we don't want, Kevin brought it up the other day, we don't want to take time with these guys. We want to just, they should be good right away. But he does seem like the classic possibility that, hey, he's starting to click at this age now.
And Russ, being around the team as much as I have the last couple of years, he had, I think it was a shoulder injury that he had a massive reconstructive surgery on. So, I mean, that was a factor. He played late last year, or played, some last year, but he really, I don't think was completely 100% healthy. So this might be the first time he's been healthy in 2 or 3 years. Okay, Minnesota's 2-0. Maybe that was expected because I think we all had thought, yeah, okay, there you go, Russ. Keep doing that. Florida at 2-0.
Hold on. The thing about Florida, let's not overlook the fact that Bob looks good, because a lot of people didn't even want to think that even as a backup, Bob could look good. And both Kevin and I said he could be an ideal backup, but we'll start the year, and if he's halfway decent, that could help propel this team, and he's been better than halfway decent.
Yeah, I don't think they, Kev, I don't think they want to play Spencer Knight 40 or 50 games. I think they I think they want to split it between him and Bobrovsky. I don't think they want to load everything on a 21-year-old kid.
No, you're absolutely right. Like they would prefer that Bob come around for a variety of reasons. It is hard to have a backup making $10 million.
Yeah.
But it also, if you can take the pressure off the kid, he can develop at his own pace. And, if you just force him in there, then you got to have him. He's got to step up. So, yeah, I mean, I think Bill Zito has a good plan there where they're hoping that, they're talking mostly about a tandem, and with the idea that Knight would be the 1B, not the 1A.
Right.
And that's probably the way to approach it, because then if he steals the net, he steals the net.
Right. That is the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of let it happen organically, as they like to say now.
Yeah. In the Metro, Pittsburgh's 2-0-1, which is shocking.
Stunning. Yeah. I want to talk about Pittsburgh because I watched their games, and boy, I would say we're all wrong about Pittsburgh.
I put them in the playoffs. I said they could make the playoffs.
They did absolutely nothing in the offseason.
Right.
They lost Tanev. They didn't address their goaltending. Malkin's out 2 months. Crosby came into the season not himself because of the injury as well.
Gensel's out with COVID.
Gensel's out with COVID. Nothing looked good for that team. And, in the Metro, we all know how tough that is. But they've gotten off, and now they're really playing on momentum. And I think what it speaks to is just the culture of Pittsburgh. I mean, what do we know about Pittsburgh? What we know is they're going to score goals because that's what they always do and what they've done for 2 decades. And secondly, they win. They've been in the playoffs for 2006. That's not an accident. So,
and I mentioned what I saw in their practices, guys that they were resurrecting. I also said at that time, Brock McGinn looked good, and that was a signing, Kevin. That was a good, low-cost, under-the-radar kind of signing, because Brock McGinn has been one of those players that can look really good at times in the NHL. So you figure under the right system, and he's a point a game right now. So Drew O'Connor, I mentioned Drew O'Connor as a guy who was a college scorer, and he is getting some points for them. And just the effort and the skating, they will skate other teams into the ground. And that's something and now Malkin's skating, it's at least the chat room's reporting it, so I'm sure they read it somewhere. Like, all of these things are starting to happen, and you just wonder, like, when Malkin and Crosby get there, will they be the same team or will it change it? But if it all stays that way and they're this incredibly hardworking team, they're going to make the playoffs because they've got enough guys there that have to play well to keep their jobs. Like, they have a bunch of those guys now.
Yeah, and Russ, I can remember it was more than a few years ago in one instance when both Crosby and Malkin were out, and Pittsburgh was having success with, I think it was Tyler Kennedy playing as their number one center. For a short spurt, for a month or two, you might be able to get away with it playing with a lot of effort and high energy, but in the end, you're going to need those talented players contributing. So, I mean, we'll see how they're doing a month or so from now when maybe we'll probably go, Crosby will be back or is back, and Malkin will be closer to being back. Now,
are we going to mention Vancouver, Mike? Because if not, there's something I want to mention about them.
Well, let me just finish this off here. Carolina, we didn't. They're not surprising being 2-0 because how good of a team they are. Columbus, Kev, is almost as surprising as Buffalo. Max Domi scoring, I think it was 3 or 4 points, and granted it was against his old team, Arizona, so I'm sure he was motivated there. But they're 2-0. They've only allowed 3 goals in 2 games. Apparently, Elvis Merzlikins is saying he's going to win the Vezina. That's a nice boast for a player. But if you can back
Eck is his agent,
you can back it up. God bless. But Columbus is a little bit surprising right now with what they're doing.
Oh yeah. I probably shouldn't say Elvis is nothing but a hound dog, but I'm stunned by that. I love Elvis though as a goaltender. I play in a fantasy league, and I tried desperately to hang on to him. I had him, but we're in a salary cap league, and I couldn't keep him. But I really believe in him as a goaltender, and I think he had trouble adjusting when he first came over to the width of the the rink, and so it took him a little while to get going. But now that he's in there, I don't have any doubt that he is going to be the man there in that Corpusal. He is a really, really first-rate goalie, and I thought Edmonton should have gone out and tried to get him. I beat that drum pretty hard to try to make a trade, but as it turned out, I think Columbus wanted to trade Corpusal and not Merzlikins. So.
And that might be in the end who Edmonton ends up getting if their goaltending is not good. It's we've talked about Koskinen or somebody with Dallas, but Korpisalo is somebody that they probably as a backup making a little less than $3 million might be somebody that they end up moving before the end of the year.
And they don't really have a center of note in Columbus whatsoever, and they're 2-0 now.
No, that's why Cole Sillinger made the team. That was
absolutely. I mean, Cole Sillinger is a terrific young player.
He's a great young player.
But if you said, would any other team be happy with him as their, is he still number one? During preseason, he was their number one center.
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, I don't either. I haven't looked. I
haven't seen him yet.
Ross, you wanted to finish off with Vancouver.
I do want to say one thing quick. Laine is great with the pressure off. We'll say that because he's scoring now. And I still have to give props to Eric Robinson, who played at Princeton. I covered him his entire career. Always a great skater, overachiever, good penalty killer. And he's even become a better player than I thought he could be. And I think Torts helped him. He was a Torts kind of guy. And, he's already got a point in 2 games. So that those kind of pluggers help. But I did want to bring up Vancouver because, again, when I saw Bobby Orr play, I was young. He was already in 72. I was probably already seeing the middle of the road Bobby Orr for Bobby Orr standards. And so I never got to see the great Bobby Orr. So I always put a level of skating to the Brian Leach level at the defensive position. And I think Quinn Hughes or Paul Coffey. And I think Quinn Hughes is better than that. I saw Quinn Hughes against the Flyers make some plays Sean Couturier won a Selke. And Sean Couturier couldn't even get near him on a puck with him just doing some great edge work. I saw Hughes going from one side of the ice to the other to completely shut down a play with not that much effort. I don't think there's a better skating defenseman in the league. And we're talking about Cale Makar and a lot of great guys. And so if people ever wonder what's his superpower that's going to sort of keep him going, it's that.
And
his passing is amazing too.
And speaking of Hughes, one of the Hughes brothers, Kevin, with the absence of Jack Eichel, and probably more than likely he's not going to be ready for the Olympics. If he does, even if he gets the surgery tomorrow, he's probably not going to be ready for the Olympics. Jack Hughes, and we talked about Jack Hughes possibly being on the U.S. Olympic team. If you've watched him his first couple games, especially that goal that he scored against Chicago on the 3-on-3, I think he's motivated to want to make the U.S. Olympic team because he looks markedly better than he did last year.
Yeah, and he really needed to do that. I had talked to some people who were involved in the decision making, and they just saw his Hughes last year when I did my first projected thing as a bubble guy. I don't think he's a bubble guy anymore. I think he's going to get on the team, with Jack Eichel looking more and more like he's not going to be on the team. I mean, he'd have to have surgery tomorrow, and even then, I don't know if he can come back.
Right.
But just they need to have I think they like the idea of Trocheck and Larkin, filling out the third and fourth line. But I think they want somebody else in there, and I think Hughes could be a good fit if he continues to develop the way that he's looked really good thus far in this short time we've seen him.
Yeah.
One last thing, Mike, because someone's asking about Dawson Mercer in the chat room. Last July, I wrote about him for Full Press, and I said he could really be a goal scorer, and he's got a point in his first game, but he was scoring in the preseason, which helped him get his job. He could score goals. That kid skates well. He has a lot of torque on his shot. And if they put him with the right players, they could get some results out of him. So I'm not shocked at Dawson Mercer. I just didn't know when he was going to hit.
Yeah. 4 games tonight. Rangers, Toronto, the return of Austin Matthews to the Leafs lineup. Seattle at Philadelphia, Anaheim and Calgary, and St. Louis and Arizona. We'll talk about some of those games tomorrow. And
so one thing on that, Mike.
Yep.
Growing up, and I don't know if this was like this for everybody, but maybe because I lived in New York, against the teams that I always liked, players always hit milestones, and you always saw the replays of like, hey, this guy got his 500th homer. Yeah, it's against the Mets. This guy got his 300 goal. It's against the Rangers. This guy, and it always seemed to be that way. And Matthews is close to his 200 goal. I think he's at 199. Mm-hmm. And so I can guarantee you he's going to hit it tonight. Like it's going to happen because that replay will get played for a while, and that's just the way it goes.
Are there any ex-Leafs on the Rangers, Russ? Because ex-Leafs always score against the Leafs.
True. I
don't think so.
I don't think so.
So we're safe.
Oh, no, Greg McKay.
Greg McKay. He'll score 4 tonight.
Greg McKay will get a hat trick.
There you go. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.